Good evening, good day, and welcome to Spotlight, the news and feature show on your own Channel 977 about people and events of interest to Lake Monticello. On behalf of the LMOA broadcast group, I'm Ron Krause, and today the spotlight shines on Lake Monticello's new general manager, Steve Hurwitz. Steve took up the reins on March 5. He came to us from Northern Virginia. He has roots farther north, and basically as a career Air Force officer has lived all over the world. But we'll let him tell us about that. Meanwhile, it's a pleasure to welcome General Manager Steve Hurwitz. Steve.
Thank you, Ron. Very glad to be here and to have this opportunity to discuss why we're here and the hopes and aspirations for this wonderful place.
Oh, well, that's great. We might as well pick up your background from the beginning. I just said farther north. Now, farther north means?
Well, I'm happy to claim New York and New Jersey. Not unlike many of our residents here, I started life in New York, in fact, in the Bronx. And then at about age 10, moved to New Jersey and grew up in Paramus, New Jersey, a place that a lot of people know about because of the shopping malls.
Absolutely.
And for me, though it was a little bit of heaven, it was a great place to grow up in the 50s and early 60s before going to college.
Mm-hmm. And where did you move on to college?
Well, I decided to stay in the state,
Yeah.
so it was Rutgers, the state university.
Mm-hmm.
And that was at a time when Rutgers was really a small men's college. The school hadn't quite grown into its full-fledged role as the state flagship university as it has since. So it was 5,000 undergraduate, all men's college, and so it had all the flair of a small school, unlike the large school that it is now.
Yeah, that became all that. I think originally called Queens College for the liberal arts portion.
Correct.
In particular, was it not?
And it was Queens College in contrast to King's College down the road.
Yeah.
At Princeton.
Yes. Yeah, we've heard of them also.
Yes.
What were you planning to be as a result of your college experience?
Well, I started out studying biochemistry, and then I switched into psychology for reasons that a lot of other people have made that switch. Mm-hmm. Biochemistry was one of the tougher subjects, and so I switched into psychology, really enjoyed that, and kind of emphasized in my undergraduate work the research part of that, not so much human factor and why people do things, which gets into a whole nother field. But as I was doing that, I participated in Air Force ROTC, kind of as a sideline, although your first 2 years you had to at Rutgers in those days, like at many schools. ROTC was mandatory. And I got a little flavor of the Air Force. And then as I got to be more senior, I thought, well, what am I going to do? So my intention was to go to law school, so I applied and was admitted to a law school in Boston called Boston University Law School. And my intention was to do that, but I also got an acceptance to Air Force Officer Training School because I didn't complete all 4 years of ROTC, you just had to do the first 2. But with that flavor of the Air Force, which I kind of liked, I applied for Officer Training School and got accepted. And then I made a decision one way or the other. I thought I'd join the Air Force for just 4 years and then come back and start law school. Well, that reversal of track never happened.
Mm-hmm. You got bit by the flying bug, huh?
I got bit by the flying bug and living around the world and all the great people that I found myself working with.
Mm-hmm. Particular field in the Air Force?
I started out as an aircraft maintenance officer, and then the Air Force at that time desperately needed other officers in airplanes besides pilots, and they're generally called navigators, although they fulfill many different roles. So not only was that exciting, because by that point I'd started to really like the Air Force, and it was in California. So for a boy from New York and New Jersey, California sounded exciting. I had not been there, and I looked forward to being out in California, the whole flying training thing, and it was, and it turned out to be very exciting.
Mm-hmm. So you decided to stay in, and so that took you lots of foreign places, so to speak.
Yes, indeed. I met my future wife while I was in navigator training, and as soon as the opportunity for an overseas assignment came up, she was all for it, And then it just kept happening time and time again. She was capable to move the family on the drop of a hat, a skill I don't quite understand, but I appreciate. And she enjoyed living overseas, and our children did too, as far as we could tell. And so we did have an opportunity to be overseas quite a bit.
Yeah. How many of the children were you taking hither and yon at this time?
Well, it was 3 in total,
Okay.
pretty close in age. We waited a few years before we had any, which was a good thing, because when you're young officer flying, you really are busy and you're away from home a great deal.
Yeah.
So I was very grateful that when we started having a family, my career involved being at home more than it had before that time, which was being away from home virtually all the time. So I had a chance to have somewhat of a normal life in terms of upbringing of the children,
Yeah.
all 3 of them.
Yeah. Any particular favorites when you lived overseas?
Well, I'll name the places we lived in mostly, and they're all favorites, but there is one that was most favorite, and I don't think it'll be that hard to guess. So we had 2 tours in Italy, 2 in Germany, 1 in Guam, and 1 in Korea, and then we also spent considerable time in Japan and a fair amount of time in Thailand. But of all those, we really, when we look back on it, we remember Italy the most.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The food, the people, the lifestyle.
Yeah.
Great memories, and we really enjoyed it when we were doing it.
Yeah. Well, then, so you came. It was how long did that become?
You mean in the Air
Total.
Force?
Yeah, in the Air Force.
Well,
total.
30 years.
30. All right.
You know, a lot of people leave the military service at 20.
Yeah.
When we hit the 20-year point, I asked my wife if she thought it was the best thing for us and the family to leave, and she said, "I don't think you're going to leave no matter what I say because you love it." So she was fully in support of that too. So we stayed all the way to 30 years.
Oh, well, that makes it go. When, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And
Well-
something we're proud of, the children were pulled in and out of schools and suffered those short-term consequences, leaving friends behind and all that. But at the end of the day, they voted with their feet, and as they went through their schooling and then college, much to our surprise, all 3 of them joined the Air Force.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
So we had all 3 in the Air Force for about 7 years.
Wow. All right. So here you are, coming out. You've been in the skies. You've been all over the world. I'm sure say, all right, what dost I do now?
We decided that where we were going to live was more important than anything. And we loved Colorado. We'd been stationed there too, in addition to all that overseas. And we really liked Colorado. We made strong friends there. We were stationed there once, and I was the base's representative with the Chamber of Commerce and other activities. So we had strong contacts there. So we decided Colorado. And then we also thought that living up there, we could worry about a job later. And indeed, I kind of fell into the business of managing condominiums and HOAs in that regard. We built a house about a mile from a ski resort.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And then about only a few miles from several other ski resorts. Really ski country in Colorado. And just by accident of showing up at a job market and having a resume that didn't have too many spelling errors on it and so forth, I ended up getting hired managing condominiums and some HOAs at a ski resort.
All right, so that becomes the basis of that experience.
Yes, I wasn't sure it was another career, but it turned out to be a career with education, credentialing, and then increasing responsibility, doing a lot of interesting things, including teaching for the National Association that provides training and certification for managers. They have a program of classes all over the country. And after I reached a certain level of experience, I got to teach for them pretty much all over the country in interesting topics, finance, facility management, and then also a basic course that all managers take at the beginning. And I learned something that all teachers know, which is you don't know it as well as you thought until you try to teach it.
That's correct.
But it was a tremendous learning vehicle at the same time.
Yeah, marvelous. So then how did you work your way back east?
we were doing very well in Colorado, enjoyed everything there, including the lifestyle, living in the mountains as we did. But then all three of our children, who at that point were in the Air Force, and at one point had all been in Colorado, they all ended up back east with a typical Washington assignment for young officers. And then they started developing their families, having their children, our grandchildren. And we thought, well, we could enjoy the life in Colorado and be grandparents who come a couple of times a year. But we said, let's go try something different. So we came east for what was supposed to be 2 years.
Like when you were going to go into the Air Force.
Yes, it was an interim decision that turned out to be lifelong. Yeah. Quite right. And then 18 months into that purported 2 years, we one night at dinner, I looked at my wife and said, honey, you don't have your packing list ready. You must not be ready to go back. And she said, what? Go back? We're not leaving the grandchildren, who were just beginning to come along, but they did. So we lived half a mile from our daughter and a son-in-law who had 3 children in pretty quick order. So we were kind of like the Walton family. We ate in their house more than we ate in our house. My wife was the full-time nanny for the first, the second, and then the third grandchild.
Oh boy. Wow.
And that was exactly why we moved. And then we never did go back to Colorado.
Okay. So at some point, you decided to move on from that situation.
Yes. We kept the house in Colorado until about 3 or 4 years, and then we said, we're really, really not going back, so we better sell the house. And that was a permanent commitment back east. So I managed and did other things like that in the Northern Virginia, Washington metro area for what amounted to close to 10 years.
Oh, all right. So that's, so you grew up, or the grandchildren grew up with you, or you grew up with them?
Yes, indeed, and they do change fast.
Yeah, they certainly do, that we know. What then led you to leave that situation?
Well, it was the grandchildren again. As their careers took them away, it became apparent they weren't coming back quickly, frequently, or for any kind of duration, long duration, as far as we could tell. They, in fact, are overseas. At one point, we had some in London, some in Brussels, and some in Afghanistan.
Oh, wow.
So some, I should say, one.
Yeah.
And then they didn't seem to be coming back. So we thought, well, it's a wonderful life up there, a lot of cultural and sports activities. We're big Nats fans and so forth. But we also said, we looked at living on the water, either on a lake or at the ocean when we first moved to Northern Virginia, and it just didn't work out for us at the time. But then this situation, we got to that situation, that point in life where it was, well, we don't have to live up there anymore. And so for about a period of a year, I looked rather casually for any positions that might become open on a lake or at the ocean. And actually, they're precious and very few, because people hold on to those positions because it really is a wonderful combination of work and living.
Right.
And then on the web page for the Professional Association, this popped up. The listing was about 2 weeks old because I wasn't monitoring it all that closely. I sent an email saying, are you still accepting resumes? And the answer came back, well, okay, go ahead, send one. And the rest is history.
Well, how about that? Well, I guess you come down, interview, you could bond with Board President Rich Barringer, also an Air Force pilot.
Yes. Well, Rich and I share a very common background in a lot of ways, including the Air Force, the specific job we did in the Air Force. And it's true, if you're in a profession like that and you do it for a long time, you develop certain ways of doing things. And I recognize Rich as a kindred soul, along with the other board members who I could tell were serious, committed, knew what they were talking about. The interview was intense, but I mean detailed, but relaxed.
Yeah.
And I was impressed by that.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure the job was going to be offered, but it was. And it didn't take me long to say yes.
Oh, that's great. So are you settling in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So they offered and I said yes.
I was struck by your report, things you mentioned at a board meeting, I think a month or so ago, and one would expect a new general manager, obviously, you got to spend that first period of time meeting the people, getting to know the staff, finding the men's room, et cetera, and getting familiar with organization, committees and the like, and which I'm sure you have gone about with due diligence doing. But I was struck also by you seem to have engaged in a fair amount of outreach beyond the committee, beyond the community for, I'll call it this early in the game, meeting with Fluvanna County executives and some health agencies and the Office of Aging and the some service clubs. And I'm interested what led you to do, including the Army Corps of Engineers in Charlottesville, for heaven's sakes. What the, you know, interested in what led you to undertake all that?
Well, during the interview, it was stressed that there's, you know, normally an association, even a large one like this, and it is very large, 95% of what happens is strictly internal. It's internal leadership, the volunteers, the residents and owners, the activities. But because of Lake Monticello's place in the county, in Fluvanna, and the importance of the water, the management of the lake, and everything associated with it, it's clear that there were many agencies that had a huge stake in Lake Monticello, and the lake also had a stake in all these other entities and agencies. So it was very easy to see it was an important part of the job to at least say hello and figure out who people were and let them see me so I wasn't just a stranger. And I found that very pleasant. I found everybody that I met, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Board of Supervisors, some volunteer agencies, I found them open, welcoming, and very seriously committed to life, not just at the lake, but in the county. So I'm very glad I had an opportunity to do that early, because once you get past a certain point, it's kind of old news. So I'm very glad the board supported me doing that, and I told them I needed to have time to do that, as well as get my feet on the ground and figure out, as you said, where the doors are.
Yeah. Well, I think that may be very important down the road as well. I don't think it's a large secret that in some cases, even though there has been great involvement by many, many Lake Monticello people in Fluvanna County affairs and in the arts and in a variety of activities, there is still a separation, shall I call it, of people who don't know each other very well. And I would think it would be to the lake's advantage to get to be known and to interact with county agencies such as this. You spring off of that at one point by saying, again, I guess in your report, you're interested in exploring with some services or programs that might be of benefit to aging population here at the lake. What are you referring to there?
Well, that's really an easy one. First of all, we do have residents of varying ages, all the way from babies to very senior citizens. And of course, as an HOA, we're not prepared to provide services explicitly. However, the county has a fully developed system of services of various kinds, in addition to many volunteer agencies. And it became apparent that our job, that the HOA's ability to make access easier, to act as an interlocutor between the people, the residents who might benefit from assistance, and many do already, let that be said. It's not a matter of starting from ground zero, not at all. Meals on Wheels, for example, is a very hardy program with many, many volunteers, many who live in the lake, but, but not only that. So that, as an example, there are many other services that not just seniors, but people who could benefit from assistance of various kinds would enjoy. So we've been in contact with community, with the county director of volunteer services, including aging.
That's good.
And I'm glad to report that's going very well. It'll take a little time, and it won't even, the growth won't even be obvious, and we would like to for it not even to be obvious that we're involved, because we won't make it happen. We'll just assist in it happening. But I have found an openness to that and a willingness to look at it. In addition to that, we're really making progress in terms of things, recreation programs. And we're just having, we've had preliminary discussions with the county in that area too. And I can, the most accurate report I can give at this point is it was a positive and affirmative meeting about the potential opportunities in terms of programs and recreation that would benefit the residents of the lake as well as any resident in the county. Now, some of that already happens, but there's an opportunity to make it even better with more programs. We're particularly interested in programs for children of various ages, including teenagers. So we're looking forward to some interesting developments in that area in the near future.
You know, I think that would be a wonderful wonderful addition. That would be some
it would be,
nice
and it's
kind of a missing piece.
It's entirely preliminary, and there's always things that can get in the way, but we're determined to give it the old college try and climb over those barriers if need be. And I should say that's with the board's direction and support, and they have. You know, I keep them informed. That's my job, and they've said, yes, go ahead and see what you can work, what can work and what you can make happen.
Joe, that's great. You also reported on an effort to address vehicular speeding here in the lake, sort of a perennial issue, and yet we are, thank heavens, we are blessed by a speed limit, if you will, because of, as anybody knows on the roadways at any one time, cars, bicycles, mopeds, walkers, joggers, runners, baby carriages, whatever, and it's with very narrow roadways, very often not an awful lot of room to maneuver. With the speeding, what are the specifics of that program?
That is very important. My own wife, who recently we just emptied out our house that is selling. Next week, we close on it. She's been busy up north getting the house ready, but she recently moved down full time, and she walks every morning. And she's reported walking on Jefferson and having lots of cars come by. And she said a huge percentage of people slow down the cars and pull over. She also steps aside like most walkers do. But everyone knows there's a lady who also runs with a triple stroller with 3 children in it. And her opportunity to pull aside is limited. So there definitely are factors, quality of life and safety. So we're approaching it a couple of ways. One that's a little bit of an aside, we're developing a map of places you can walk or run and totally avoiding Jefferson. And we'll have mileage, maps with mileages on it. And it basically will involve going to beaches and starting from beaches, and then you'll have an opportunity to do whatever mileage you'd like and have it marked out on a map. So that's coming soon. But as a separate matter in terms of controlling speeding, in working closely with our police chief, Tom Beauvais, he's the first one to say what we all know. Speeding is with us forever, and it's all in the eye of the beholder. So given that, we're involved in multiple ways of addressing it, including such simple things as advertising it on the webpage, encouragements to observe the speed limit on the webpage and in the newspaper and other means. Very soon we'll have little cards that at the right time we'll be handing to quote everyone coming in through the gate, particularly the tradesmen, saying, welcome, we're glad you're here to do business. It's a 25-mile-an-hour community. And will that stop everybody in their tracks or make them immediately adhere to 25? No, probably not. Another factor, and it's unfortunate but true, police presence helps. So the police will be parked in certain places. They don't have to get out of their car or lean out the window with a radar gun. They can monitor it from inside the car. They can also monitor it from a standstill when they're driving head-on towards someone or when they're trailing someone. So they are doing increased, I wouldn't say speed trap, that's not what we're after. They do have parameters they work in. We're not interested in giving someone a ticket when they're going 25.1 miles an hour or anything like that. But they are making more traffic stops and advisory to people alone saying, you know, you were going X amount of speed. So they have the ability to give warnings, verbal and written, as well as the more serious matter of tickets and summonses to court and so forth. But they're not afraid to do the summonses for where that's appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah.
The last piece of it is we're shopping now for a radar sign that says your speed is.
They're effective.
And that they're effective because it's very easy to lose sight of your speed. And especially if you're used to going more than 25, you can easily cruise at a speed considerably higher than that. Then the hills contribute to it.
Oh, absolutely.
So we think we found one at the right price, very affordable, and we should be ordering that soon. And we're very anxious to get that out as yet another assistance to let people know what speed they're really going, so they can consider the appropriate action, which is to drive 25.
Yeah.
It really is safest. And you know the old story, if you're going from X to Y, going 37 instead of 25 saves you 12 seconds or 19 seconds. It's trivial. So, you know, we're approaching it from many ways.
And there are new considerations now, at least according to, again, Board President Rich Barringer at last Thursday's board meeting. Apparently now we find out that whereas we were able to stop someone, even give them a ticket, keep the dollars in the lake rather than to Fluvanna County and all that entail of an officer having to go and say blah, 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 and not appear on a person's record. But now apparently we find out that we're not really legally entitled to do that, and that so now it will be a Fluvanna County ticket and person will be subject to points on their license or insurance surcharge, as the case may be.
That's true, and depending on on an individual's driving record, there could be very serious consequences.
Makes big difference.
And it can add up. So we've reviewed that. In fact, that policy is being redrafted to recognize what you were referring to. What's also true is we can stop people and give a county summons, and then you get into all the serious consequences you referred to. And in some cases, that's entirely appropriate. I don't think anybody wants someone driving by their house on Jefferson at 50.
Heavens,
It's certainly not when they're out on the street with their stroller.
No. You've also mentioned your interest in basically promoting better communications, which again has been a perennial issue here in the lake between the community and the board. What do you have in mind there?
It's an important matter, and there can be apparent obstacles that really don't have to be obstacles. So on that basis, it's very important at board meetings that we not start engaging in a discussion where the board is not prepared. It doesn't have, the staff hasn't had a chance to do any research for the board on a subject. So we have open forums at the board meetings, except for special meetings or annual meetings, but for the regular board meetings, there are two open sessions. One is to talk about anything that's on the agenda. The other one is to bring up anything that you'd like. What's also true is that it's very difficult to get into a back and forth on a factual basis. The board just has trouble delivering accurate information or appearing to overpromise on something that they're just hearing for the first time. So my habit has been to take notes, careful notes. I usually get about 3 or 4 pages worth of notes at all the board meetings, and then to use that information to disseminate it. Now, honestly, we're just getting into that now, so people haven't really seen that. But if a question is asked by one person, it's more than likely of interest to other people. So on that basis, we check on everything, and we want to get the word out in general as well as to the person who asked it specifically. So we're getting into 2 things to get it out to the whole population. One is we're starting much more robust, frequently asked questions on the webpage. So the questions will be there. They'll just be added on and on. So whenever anybody's curious, they can go on. They don't have to have a question in mind, but they're likely to see more and more questions that they might have asked as we accumulate those questions. And then the newspaper, which is a wonderful one. It's the best I've ever seen in a community like this. Judy Fish does a fantastic job with that.
Does.
That's a first-class operation and a great venue, great media for getting the word out. And then, as a courtesy, what I like to do is, as a follow-up, go back to the person who asked the question and say, hey, did you see the answer in the newspaper? Did you see the answer in the frequently asked questions? And then a very brief summary of the questions. By the way, that's one reason we really encourage people to be generous with their email addresses so that we can get back to them via email, which is the most expedient way to disseminate that kind of information to them individually. Letters are cumbersome and time-consuming, and phone calls can be disturbing to people. You know, we call them at dinner time or the wrong time. So we're looking forward to all of that, breathing life into all of that, which is actually very easy. The biggest expense of time is doing the research and figuring out what the answer is. Or, if appropriate, then taking the new action. But we're glad to do that. It keeps the organization alive. And it's amazing how solid many suggestions and ideas can be. Sometimes it's a matter of clarifying something. But often it's, you know what, that was a good thing to look into, and we're doing that.
Well,
and we're very pleased to do that.
That's good. Well, I'm sure you obviously have goals and you have policies handed down by the board of directors, your job to implement, et cetera, et cetera. Do you yourself have any particular goals for, say, the balance of this year?
Well, yes, I really do. First of all, to have taken this job at this stage in my working life, which is getting into years where someone else might say, hey, it's time to give it up. But it was such an exciting proposition to come to a community this large and apply some of the experience I had in the past, both managing HOAs, and I was fortunate enough in the Air Force to be a base commander, which is very similar to the job and the community, very similar size, the breadth of activities. So on that basis, one of my goals was to meet the community, help the community move along with its goals, generally as specified and delivered to me by the board or in existing policies. So it's a matter of, I would say, general overall moving along, helping the community continue on the path that obviously it's been on for at least 5 years. We're sitting in a brand new building, another brand new building up the way. The golf course right behind us is first class, and I understand in the past it was maybe not first class. And so many other improvements. So general improvement in what's going on. I would say communication within the community, increase in volunteerism, although our volunteers are fantastic. I've never seen the depth of contributions that our volunteers give. It's highly professional. It's not just picking daisies, although the LMBC will think I'm referring to them. They don't pick daisies. They contribute a huge amount. I've never seen anything like that. They're a wonderful group, as well as many of the other volunteer groups. And then beyond that, I would say moving the community on to where there's maximum benefit to each and every resident for every dollar that they put into assessments and other fees. I think that's really important. Some people move in not knowing the nature of the community. So in that very way, we're moving to make sure everyone who moves in, even someone who didn't or buys a house or moves in as a renter, is fully aware of the nature and the benefits of the association and the obligations that come along with it. Well, that's a two-way street. There's obligations. The board has obligations, fiduciary duty, and the staff too. So continuing beyond this year to make this a community of excellence that it's clearly on the way towards.
Well, that's broad but laudable, noteworthy, and would be marvelous. We certainly wish you all the best of luck in achieving that and in completing your own move from Northern Virginia and getting into things down here. Anytime you would like to come back and utilize these cameras and broadcast for an issue, a report, anything on your mind, we'd be delighted to have you.
Thank you, Ron. I appreciate this opportunity, and I will take you up on that offer. Thank you very much.
Excellent. We have been talking with Lake Monticello's new general manager, Steve Hurwitz, and we hope that you've been listening carefully and will participate basically as residents in ideas and programs and communications as they go forward. We hope you'll come back and visit these quarters again and enjoy also the broadcast group's full range of programming on Channel 977. So for the LMOA broadcast group, I'm Ron Krause. We thank you. Look forward to the next Spotlight. Good night, good day. We'll see you next time.